So picture this. It's a Thursday night. You're sitting at your kitchen table, maybe with a glass of wine, maybe just a sad cup of reheated coffee, and you open your banking app for no real reason other than habit. And you see it, your paycheck hit. A number that, honestly, a younger version of you would have cried happy tears over. Like, you remember being 22, scraping together enough money to cover rent and ramen, thinking, if I could just make 6 figures, everything would be fine. I'd be set. I'd feel free. And here you are, 6 figures, or close enough that we're not splitting hairs. And instead of feeling like the protagonist in your own financial success story, you close the app and feel this weird, low-grade anxiety sitting in your chest. Because the account, it doesn't look the way you imagined it would. The savings are, not exactly where they should be for someone at your income level. Your credit card balance is doing that thing again, and there's this gnawing feeling you can't quite shake. The feeling that you're working really, really hard and somehow still living paycheck to paycheck, or close enough to it that the distinction barely matters. This isn't a one-person phenomenon, by the way. This is millions of people, and I think about this constantly. My name's Emmy, and I spend way too much time thinking about money, financial psychology, and why people who earn genuinely good incomes still find themselves feeling financially stuck, stressed, and honestly, a little embarrassed about it, like there's something wrong with them specifically, rather than something structural happening that nobody's really explaining clearly. And that's kind of what today's about, because here's the thing. The feeling of being broke at 6 figures isn't about weakness or stupidity or not trying hard enough. It's about a collection of very specific, very real traps that are almost invisible when you're inside them. And once you can see them, once you can actually name what's happening, something shifts. Not magically, not overnight, but something shifts. So let's actually get into it. The first thing we have to talk about, and I think this is the one that does the most quiet damage, is something called lifestyle inflation. And I know you've probably heard this term before. It might even feel a little condescending, like, oh, you're spending more money because you're making more money. Groundbreaking, Emmy. But stay with me, because the way lifestyle inflation actually works in practice is a lot sneakier than the textbook definition suggests. When most people imagine lifestyle inflation, they picture someone going out and buying a Ferrari the week they get a raise. Dramatic, obvious, easy to avoid. But real lifestyle inflation is almost never like that. It's quieter, it's incremental. It happens in a dozen small, completely justifiable decisions that each make total sense in isolation. You got the promotion, so you move to a slightly nicer apartment. Reasonable. You're commuting more now, so you buy a more reliable car. Practical. You're working harder and more stressfully than ever, so you start ordering DoorDash on weeknights because honestly, you deserve to not cook after a 10-hour day. Fair. You finally have a salary that justifies nicer things, so you stop buying the store brand version of stuff and start defaulting to whatever you actually want. Makes sense. And here's the thing, none of these individual decisions are insane, but stacked together, your cost of living has quietly expanded to eat almost everything you're earning. You've basically built a life that requires your current income just to maintain, which means you're not actually building anything. You're on a treadmill, and the treadmill is just faster now. I remember talking to a friend. She just crossed into 6 figures for the first time. She was so excited. And then 8 months later, she said to me, I feel like I'm making less money than I was 2 years ago. And she wasn't saying it as a complaint exactly, more like genuine bewilderment. And when we actually sat down and traced it, her expenses had grown almost dollar for dollar with her income. Not because she was reckless, because every single upgrade felt earned and logical at the time. The way out of this isn't to live like a monk. It's about being intentional with one specific rule before a raise or income bump hits. Decide in advance what percentage of the new income you're going to let yourself spend. Because if you don't decide proactively, your lifestyle will decide for you, every single time. Okay, the second thing, and this one is going to feel a little uncomfortable, so just bear with me. It's about the social cost of earning well, because nobody talks about this part honestly, and it's costing people a lot. When you earn a good income, there's this invisible social tax that starts to get applied to your life. Friends assume you can pick up the tab more often. You get invited to things that are more expensive. bachelorette trips to Scottsvale, birthday dinners at restaurants with no prices on the menu, group vacations that your colleagues are suggesting because we all make good money now. And here's the subtle psychological trap. Because you do make good money, you feel genuinely unable to say no without it seeming like you're being cheap or weird. There's also this internal pressure around image. Once you're earning at a certain level, there's this quiet assumption, sometimes from others, sometimes just from yourself, that your life should look like it. The apartment, the clothes, the car, the vacations, the restaurants. And I want to be real about this because for a lot of high earners, especially first-generation professionals or people who grew up with less, there's this deep psychological need to visibly demonstrate that you've made it. It's not shallow, it's deeply human. It's about identity and belonging and wanting the outside of your life to match the inside feeling of having worked really hard to get here. But the cost of performing success is staggering, genuinely. And it's a cost that doesn't show up as a line item in any budget. It shows up as a vague, persistent feeling that your money is disappearing into a life that somehow still doesn't feel fully yours. The honest, slightly difficult advice here is to start separating what you actually want from what you feel like you should want. That's not a quick exercise, that's ongoing internal work. But even starting to notice the difference, oh, I'm spending this because I want to, versus, oh, I'm spending this because I feel like I have to project a certain image, even that awareness alone changes how you make decisions. Third thing, and this one is particularly brutal for high earners, scope creep in your financial obligations. In other words, the way that people with good incomes tend to take on more responsibility, more people depending on them, more complex financial situations without ever really planning for it.
This looks different for different people. For some, it's family. You're making good money, which means you're quietly becoming the person who covers family emergencies, who floats a parent's rent that 1 month, who pays for a sibling's car repair because you can and they can't. And then that 1 month becomes an informal monthly arrangement, and you've essentially taken on a financial dependent you never budgeted for. For others, it's about being generous to yourself in ways that accumulate. A gym membership you don't cancel, a streaming service you forgot about, a software subscription from 3 years ago that's still quietly billing you. I'm not talking about huge numbers here. I'm talking about the slow accumulation of automatic charges that you've just stopped seeing. Most high earners, if they did a real audit, would find $300 to $500 a month just leaking out in subscriptions and forgotten recurring expenses. Money that's not going anywhere meaningful. It's just evaporating. There's also the debt weight that people carry at higher incomes. Student loans, sometimes significant ones, credit card balances from the years when the income wasn't here yet, a car payment, maybe a mortgage. These obligations don't disappear just because your paycheck went up. They often stay flat while your lifestyle expenses grow around them, so they feel proportionally lighter, but they're still there, and they're still consuming a real chunk of every paycheck. The exercise here is ruthless clarity. Sit down once, just once, though I'd say revisit it quarterly, and write out every single recurring financial obligation in your life. Every subscription, every debt payment, every informal financial commitment. See the actual total. Because a lot of people are operating their finances in a kind of comfortable blur, and the blur is expensive. Let's talk about something a little more psychological now, because I think this is the piece that a lot of personal finance content just skips for some reason, and that's the relationship between emotional state and spending behavior. Because high earners often live under significant stress, and stress and money are deeply, uncomfortably connected. There's a concept sometimes called retail therapy, but that kind of trivializes it. What's actually happening is more interesting and more serious than buying a sweater to feel better. When you're chronically stressed, working long hours, managing a lot of pressure, feeling stretched thin, your brain is constantly looking for relief, and spending provides a very fast, very real neurological hit. There's a moment of dopamine when you click Buy Now. There's a brief sense of control, of reward, of having treated yourself after a hard day or week. And here's the thing about high earners specifically. They have the access to make that impulse purchase happen. They're not constrained by I literally cannot afford this. So what would for someone with a lower income remain a frustrated thought becomes for a high earner an immediate action. And those immediate actions add up in ways that are genuinely hard to track because they're emotionally motivated rather than intentional. I think about this a lot, honestly, the connection between how we're feeling and how we're spending, because if you're someone who works under high pressure, who doesn't have a lot of time for genuine rest or joy in your daily life, your brain is going to find its dopamine somewhere. And if you haven't given it healthy outlets, rest, hobbies, connection, physical movement, it will find it in your credit card statement. The deeper question here, and I mean this gently, is what are you spending money on that's actually about filling an emotional need, not in a judgmental way, just as a question worth sitting with. Because sometimes the answer to why am I always broke is actually because I'm chronically depleted and shopping is the only quick fix I have access to. And the solution to that isn't a budget spreadsheet, it's something more fundamental about how you're living. Here's one that I find genuinely fascinating from a financial psychology perspective, the mental accounting problem. This is a real cognitive phenomenon, Nobel Prize level research actually, and it affects high earners in a specific, really costly way. Mental accounting is basically what happens when your brain treats money differently depending on where it came from or where it's supposed to go. So your base salary feels like the money you use for bills and necessities. Your bonus? That's fun money. Your tax refund? Practically free money. Your side hustle income? That goes to whatever.
Here's why this matters. When a high earner gets their bonus, there's a very strong psychological pull to treat it as something separate from their real money, as something experiential or fun or indulgent. And that feels fine because it came from somewhere extra. Except it's not extra. It's income. It's part of your total annual earnings, and if you're spending every bonus and treating every unexpected inflow as license to celebrate, you're essentially living on your base salary and spending everything else, which, depending on your obligations, might be exactly why you're not building wealth. This is also related to why people will carry a credit card balance at 18% interest while simultaneously keeping savings in an account earning 4%, because in their brain that's two separate mental accounts, debt over here, savings over there, and they don't feel connected, even though mathematically they are deeply, painfully connected. The fix for mental accounting isn't to be more rigid or robotic about money, it's just to start seeing all your income as one pool. To ask, for every dollar coming in from anywhere, where does this actually need to go to serve my future? And bonus money, tax refunds, side income, before they get spent on things that feel celebratory in the moment but don't move you forward, they deserve that same question. All right, let's talk about something that might actually be the most practically impactful thing in this whole conversation, the savings and investment gap among high earners. Because you can do everything else right, manage your lifestyle, handle your emotional spending, get your subscriptions under control, but if you're not directing a meaningful portion of your income toward assets, you are working incredibly hard to stay exactly where you are. Here's what I see a lot. High earners who are genuinely good at the earning part, but who don't have a system for the keeping and growing part. They max out their 401k because HR made it easy to set up. Maybe they have a savings account with some emergency fund money in it, but beyond that, nothing particularly intentional. And I get it. When you're working a demanding job and managing a full life, taking on the cognitive load of learning to invest feels like one more thing you don't have time for. But here's the painful math of it. Let's say you earn $120,000 a year, and you're saving, generously, 10% of it. That's $12,000 a year, and your lifestyle is consuming the other $108,000. You are working very hard to sustain that lifestyle, and if your income ever drops, goes away, or you want to stop working, you have very little runway, because your wealth is not accumulating at anything like the rate your income would suggest it should be.
The version of this that changes things is when the savings rate climbs, when you get aggressive about directing 20, 25, 30% of income into things that grow. Because at that point, you're not just sustaining a lifestyle, you're actually building something. You're accumulating assets. And assets are what eventually give you the option to work less, work differently, or stop working altogether. The uncomfortable truth is that 6 figures doesn't make you wealthy. Consistent investing does, and those are two very different things that don't automatically go together. One more thing, and then I want to bring this all together. This one's about what I'd call the illusion of future compensation. It's this mental habit where the discomfort of your current financial situation gets soothed by a vague sense that it'll be fine later, that the next raise will fix it, the next bonus, the next promotion. Once I hit X income, I'll start saving seriously. Once I pay off this one thing, I'll get my act together. And the reason this is so insidious is that it's genuinely emotionally functional. It works as a coping mechanism. It lets you keep going, keep working, keep grinding without having to face the discomfort of your current situation fully. But it also keeps you from taking the actions that would actually change things. Because if you believe the solution is later, you have no urgency right now. The thing I'd ask you to sit with is, what would you do differently right now if you knew that later wasn't coming? If you knew the next raise was going to get swallowed by lifestyle inflation just like the last one did? What would you actually change today? Because the answer to that question is almost always where the real work is. So let's bring all of this together because I don't want you to leave here feeling overwhelmed or worse, feeling like there's just too many things wrong with your financial life to fix any of them. The reason you're earning well and still feeling broke isn't a character flaw. It's not evidence that you're bad with money in some fundamental, irreversible way. It's a very predictable result of some very specific patterns that our culture, our psychology, and frankly, our financial education system all set us up to fall into. Lifestyle inflation creeps up silently. Social pressure spending is real and under-acknowledged. Financial scoop creep, the accumulating obligations, the family support, the subscription bleed compounds quietly. Emotional spending is how high-stress earners self-medicate when they're depleted. Mental accounting makes your brain treat different money differently in ways that cost you. A low savings and investment rate means income stays income instead of becoming wealth, and illusion of future compensation lets you put off the hard decisions indefinitely. None of these are character flaws, they're patterns, and patterns can be interrupted. The place to start, if you want a real, concrete, not overwhelming starting point, is awareness. Before you change a single spending habit, before you build a budget or open a brokerage account, just spend 2 weeks watching yourself. Notice when you spend and what you're feeling when you spend it. Notice which expenses feel truly chosen and which ones feel like you're just going along with the current. Notice the gap, if there is one, between the income you're earning and the financial security you're actually building. Because here's what I genuinely believe, after spending a long time thinking about and reading about and talking about this. The people who turn high incomes into actual wealth aren't the ones who are the most disciplined or the most frugal. They're the ones who are the most intentional. They know why they spend what they spend, they know where they're going, and they've built systems that move them toward that destination automatically, so it's not all willpower all the time. You don't need to be perfect. You don't need to overhaul everything. You just need to start seeing clearly, because clarity is where every real financial change actually begins. And if you're sitting here thinking, okay, but I don't even know where my money is going right now, that's actually a totally fine place to start. That's the honest starting point for a lot of people, and the honest starting point is always better than a comfortable illusion. You're earning something worth building on. It's time to actually build.